1964, the 5th of April, I gave my life to the Lord. Immediately, I began to learn real music. And I bought an organ. And I began to practice every day. And I sing, and I play, and I compose, and I transpose. I do quite a lot of things in music. And it was 1973, 72, end of 72, that I went to Umahia. And those who are from Umahia, the Masters Vessels Group. And those people too, they can sing. And then when I heard the singing again, I said, wow, this is something. And it was there I began to hear about Charles G. Finney. I had some friends there. And then some Pentecostal things. And now I began to read, really read now. And T.L. Osborne, and John G. Lake, and all these people. And I said, if I did all that when I was a sinner, now that I came to the Lord, then I pushed myself inside. I said, I'm going to swim in the river of the Spirit.
Yeah. Good day. Today, to the glory of God, I'll be talking very briefly in line with what you have just heard on the man by the name of John G. Lake. As you can see, what we'll be doing, they are historical in nature. We will actually be, much of what we'll be doing will be apart from reminding ourselves of just as we started with affirmations of the greatness of the man, such as you heard from the mouth of Mr. William Kumuyi. Once in a while, we'll be reminding ourselves of that. But what we'll be doing basically will be going through available historical records on the man John G. Lake. Actually, this is an aspect of the life of John G. Lake that is not comprehensive at all. It's just a very small aspect of his life, of the person, John G. Lake. For the sake of so many people on earth, John G. Lake was a figure that we must check. The man, John Graham Lake, was a figure that we must check. As you heard from the mouth of Mr. Kumuyi, this particular video, I pray, since Mr. Kumuyi is still alive, I pray that this video will be of blessing to him in whatever number of years or days he has left to live, so that he might have a look again at the personalities that have shaped his beliefs, the people that he came to acknowledge as his mentors, the people that they call generals. Among the Pentecostal people, the character John G. Lake was one of the biggest generals that they have in the Pentecostal circles in America, in Southern Africa, and as you heard from Mr. Kumuyi, even in Nigeria and many parts of the world. The issue, as we will see from the little that we'll do today, is that most of the people that speak glowingly about John G. Lake, about the man John G. Lake, they know very little. They know very little of him. That is the sad part of all of these things. So, I believe by the grace of God, this this video, I don't know how long or how short it's going to be. What I'm having here is about around 20 something pages. I will basically read through them. In the course of reading through it, you will discover that John G. Lake had always been somebody that anybody who has any idea, who really wants to know about the God of the Bible, since around year 1890, so around, since give or take about 130 years between that time and now, John G. Lake was a person, was a character that people should pay attention to. Well, as you see from the heading that you have before you, this is an article written by a history teacher in the university, and his name is Barry Martin. I'm taking a lot for granted in putting this thing in celluloid, in putting it in video, and I'm pleading with Mr. Barry Martin, whenever he gets this video, that he should please not take an offense at it, because the life, the eternity of hundreds of thousands of Southern Africans, Nigerians, and even people in the US are at stake. So you should please pardon me that I have not taken that I'm taking a lot of liberty with this material. You will see the reason why this is so very shortly. It's important that you should pay attention. For everybody who follows William Kumuyi, or who has followed Mr. William Kumuyi, much of what he teaches, when people like me stand up and we say, watch it, Mr. Kumuyi is very, very clever. He's very, very good. But he's good only in mathematics. When it comes to the knowledge of God, he's really not that much good. Check the Bible so that you might have your faith in what you should, rather than in whatever anybody says, or whatever earthly record, academic achievement of any human being, even if the academic achievement is on the study of the Bible, for example, even if it's in theology, it is not enough for you to hang your faith in eternity by simply relying on anybody. The Bible is what you should. What you have in the Bible, the Lord Jesus Christ introduced through the pages of the Bible, is the person that you should build your hope of today and of tomorrow on. Yeah. So as I said, this particular material is basically an academic material, but I will try to read it in such a soft way that, and I'll try to be a little slow in depicting it so that you yourself can even read it. I will be as slow as well as fast as I could, so that possibly whatever amount of it I can cover will be enough for you to take the next step. The next step that I expect from anybody who watches this video is not simply to form an opinion, but rather to do a little more research on himself. And that is why I'm showing what I'm showing, so that you can simply even take this heading, put it on your Google. Put this heading on Google, and this article will come up. It's generally free. That article is generally free. So that you can, and once you get to Google, once you get to the source of this article, you'll discover that there are quite a few more articles there that will help you. Many people, when we talk to them about the fact that there's something fishy in Pentecostalism, that is too much. It hits them like a bolt, like a thunderbolt. Until, to the glory of God, they begin to have access to things like what you have on your screen. The other thing I want to say is that where the abstract, because this is academic work, so the abstract basically summarizes what we are going to do. The abstract, this response to Marianel. Marianel was a church historian in Southern African Pentecostalism. He was an appointed church historian, a praise singer. That is what I would call Marianel. Somebody who writes to the praise of anybody. So this response to Marianel's 2016 article in Studia Historia Ecclesiastica, number 42, 162 to 65, uses primary source material. Well, this is actually the issue. It's the primary source material that is actually the issue. How do we get what we are talking about? From where? What are the sources? That is what we mean. Where do we get the ideas? When we form opinion, there are many ways to form opinion about people, historical figures like John G. Lake. One of the ways to form opinion about him is to actually listen to or read what he taught when he was alive. The other way is to read what people who were alive when he was alive, what they said, what they wrote, the newspaper clippings, articles of books and so on about him. People who were alive when he was alive. The other sources are court records. Were there court records on this character? That is what is meant by primary source material. So Mr. Button is telling you straight away that Barry Button is telling you straight away that he is going to use primary source materials. Just as I've told you, in order to refute, there's a little word, I don't know whether hagiography. You know, when you write in praise of somebody that you have in most newspapers today. What people like Mr. Kumuyi have built their faith on, they are not only fake, they are hagiography, praise singing of people who generally did not deserve the praise. One of those people that I'm looking at today is John Graham Lake. When you are in Pentecostal circle, there are so many people. They call them now they call them generals. Another of such is William Branham. You have William Branham. They write of Oral Roberts. They write of Kenneth Hagin. Hagiography, praise singing, things that they are not true, but they write about them. Primary source to refute his claim that John G. Lake, the initiator of Pentecostalism in Southern Africa, was an upstanding man of God. This article, even if I stop at this stage, the article, the first sentence in the abstract, has basically summarized what it is about. We are actually going to use the materials available as at the date, as around that time, 1890, 1895, 1908, 1912, 1911, 1924. Mr. Lake died. I think he died around 1935. Yeah, he died around 1935. So the materials were actually things that were written of him and about him when he was alive. And who actually Mr. Lake was. A wide array of American and South African sources show that Lake invented an extensive but fictitious life story. Please look at these words here in this sentence where you have my cursor. Mr. Lake invented an extensive but fictitious life story. It is on these fictitious life stories that he built apostolic faith on. The church so-called apostolic faith, which was the origin of William Kumuyi, which actually was the origin of the Southern African churches. If you look at the amount of error in the belief system of Southern African so-called churches, you will discover that they are about a degree higher than what you have in Nigeria. It is among them that you generally see a so-called pastor will give instruction that his followers should go and start eating grass. And almost all of them, supposedly well-dressed, well-fed people, they will all rush to the open field and they will start eating grass. Generally speaking, you have that from Southern African so-called Christians. This is the source of it. Let me do a little and tell you straight away that much of what you are going to hear in this video are part of the deception on which the church in South Africa, the Pentecostal church in South Africa, was founded in 1908. Birds of the same feathers, the English proverb says, they flock together. Around 1959, 1958, 1959 or so, around 57, 58, 59 or something like that, between and so on, when the Redeemed Christian Church of God was expelled from the CNS white garment group, the people that they combined with are these people, the Apostolic Faith Mission in Southern Africa. Birds of the same feather, they flock together. They are the same, and they've always been the same. A wide array of American and South African sources show that Lake invented an extensive but fictitious life story, while also creating a similarly dubious defined calling that obscured his involvement in gruesome killings in America. This is the abstract. So this single paragraph that you are seeing basically summarizes all the 28 pages in this particular article. Once in South Africa, he used invented miracles. At least you can see the words in red. He used invented miracles. There was a time that I made a small video, and I'm making this video, I don't know how long I'm going to lead, and I therefore need to make this video so that whoever God is speaking to begin to check. The reason why people like me should rise up and start telling you that you should check the lay of the ground where you are treading, that the lay of the ground is crawling with scorpions and snakes. These are some of the sources. These are some of the origin, the genesis. The other time I made a video on John Alexander Dowie. You are going to come across the name of John Alexander Dowie as we go along. In fact, you can see the keywords as you have it there. The reason was that John G. Lake was an assistant, was a personal assistant of John Alexander Dowie. You can check in the list of the videos on this YouTube channel. You will see a video on John Alexander Dowie, the invention of a religion, the invention of Pentecostalism. And one of the things you are going to see, you are going to hear, which I think many people have not paid enough attention to, was that John Alexander Dowie did not only invent Pentecostalism, he invented a fraudulent faith built on deceit. Part of the deceit that John Alexander Dowie invented in his time was to fake death of living people. They will buy coffee and put living people inside, men or women, ladies or men. Bring them to the church where John Alexander Dowie was preaching, and then he will now command them to rise from the dead. And the man that surely was living will now rise, and that was how John Alexander Dowie created his faith. Everyone that you see there, John G. Lake, Charles Spurgeon, and so on, they were followers of John Alexander Dowie. John Alexander Dowie was a little older than all of them and a little more educated, but he was a fraudulent person. John G. Lake was one of the actors. Please get that one very clearly. John G. Lake was one of the actors that John Alexander Dowie used in those days to fake miracles in America. John G. Lake, the mentor, this general that you heard his name from the mouth of William Kumuyi, was one of the actors that John Alexander Dowie used to produce fake miracles in order to hoodwink people so that they might collect money from them. That was how the Zion City, that is John G. Lake's Redeemed Christian Camp in Chicago, that was how it was built. And I generally tell people the Redeemed Christian Camp in Nigeria is actually fashioned along the way Zion City in Chicago, in Illinois, was built. The rules were generally all the same. If you don't know history, you might think that the war started yesterday. When you see the Redeemed Christian Camp in Lagos-Ibadan Expressway, and you would think that you are seeing something that is the first. It's not the first. It's actually copied along what John Alexander Dowie. Now you see the Bible verse that I put there. I put the Bible verse because of people like William Kumuyi. The word of Christ in Matthew chapter 6 verse 23. If therefore the light that is indeed be darkness, how great is that darkness? If John G. Lake was the author you were reading in order to form your so-called deeper Christian life ministry, then how dark is the darkness around you? In recent years, I have published. So this is the beginning of the article. I'll see how much of it I can do. In recent years, I'm reading the writing of Barry Morton. In recent years, I've published or put online several articles making the case that John G. Lake, the initiator of Pentecostalism in Southern Africa, and the founder of the Apostolic Faith Mission, was a fraud. Yeah, after making the assertion, I want you people to please take note that they are always superscript. You see the superscript number 1, where my cursor is. Please, you can do yourself a favor. Just go and you see at the foot of every page there are references to the superscript. The superscript number 1 refers to what you have here. Barry Morton, the devil who heals. Fraud and falsification in the career of John G. Lake. As you can see it. Missionary to South Africa. African Historical Review, number 44, 2012. So, the fact that you are going to see the primary sources, you must not take them for granted. Mr. Martin is making a fantastic assertion that the founder of the Apostolic Faith Mission was a fraud. I've argued that Lake's career as a con man began when he was a member of John Alexander Dowen's church in America in the 1890s. Please note that. And that his astonishingly successful 1908 Pentecostal mission to Southern Africa was undertaken to distance himself from killings perpetrated by his Pentecostal sect in Zion City, in Illinois. The 1908 Pentecostal mission that John Lake and his party made to Southern Africa, on which they founded the current, what we have today in Southern Africa, calling itself Pentecostal churches, in Southern Africa, in Zimbabwe, maybe part of Zambia, maybe part of Lower Zambia. Are you with me? Because they were based on the work of John G. Lake. Lake basically escaped to Southern Africa in 1908 because of the repercussion of the killing of their sect members, of innocent people that supposedly came to be healed. Once in South Africa, Lake and his missionary party used the faith healing techniques that we had perfected. Please look at what they are having in your front in black. The faith healing techniques that we had perfected. Part of the faith healing technique was what I told you earlier, of putting live people in coffin and commanding them to rise from the dead. The Pentecostal church, the Pentecostal fellowship, that is the Apostolic Faith Mission in Southern Africa, was built on the faith healing techniques of John Alexander Dowen. It was not built on faith. It was not built on prayer. It was not built on Bible study. It was built on fake people, putting living people in coffins and commanding them to rise from the dead in order to attract people to their church. That was what it was built on. While doing so, he trained a number of Africans to use these methods, and in doing so, inadvertently set the stage for the explosion of Zionist Christianity across the region. As evangelists such as Isaiah Shembe adopted his methods. The white people in 1908 who brought Christianity to Southern Africa were fraudulent conmen headed by John G. Lake. They were having the Bible in their hands, but they were teaching deception. And they were teaching that they had techniques for doing healing. In 2016, this is just in 2016, Marionel, who is considered by the AFM, that is AFM, anytime you see AFM, that's African Apostolic Faith Mission, to be a major authority on the church's history. You see the superscript. So if you go down there, you see number 2, what it is about. He was commissioned to write the church's history for his centenary in 2008. 𝐼𝐵𝐵𝐚𝐿. This is Marionel, a fire force in Africa, a history of the Apostolic Faith Mission in South Africa, 1908 to 2008. Pretoria Christian Arts Publisher, 2008. It is a hagiography. Forgive me for the big English. They are all lies. They are based on rehearsing the fraud that was the founder of the mission John Graham Lake. And part of the, as I said, part of the fraud is what the young William Kumuyi was fed in the 60s, in the 70s, about the achievement. They don't even call them the achievement. The display of power. The display of power of a general such as John Graham Lake. So let's go back to where we have the superscript 2. Wrote an extensive critique of my work in Studia Historia. These are the two historians haggling among themselves. Now maintain that my historical methods are dubious and unacceptable. That no primary research was done, and that I have an unacceptable practice of making conclusions without proof. Those are the assertions of Marianel. He repeated that as I said, anytime you see a superscript, you can just go down, you will see where it refers to. That is Marianel, John G. Lake as a fraud, con man, and the false prophet, a critical assessment. But we are going to actually get to the meat of this particular video, and we'll see whether Lake was indeed a fraud, a fraudster, a con man, or not. Whether anything from Mr. Lake should be the basis of the faith of William Kumuyi, or the hundred of thousands of souls is leading or knowing to them into hell on the false belief that they are actually deeper Christians, when in actual fact they are generally not Christians at all. He repeatedly has said that there's not any evidence for anything I say about my research on John G. Lake. At other times, when he does accept that I have source material, he rejects his impartiality. Nell insists that there is no need for any revision of our view of Lake. That is generally, this, as I said, these are academic whatever, to and fro. In a crucial section of his book, he outlined the basic features of Lake's career and references with read John G. Lake, a man without compromise. This is another praise singer of John G. Lake. There are many. There are many among the Pentecostal people. As a source of unimpeachable information, Ray's biography, along with Gordon Lindsay's John G. Lake, Apostle to Africa, that's another hagiography. Gordon Lindsay's book, so-called Apostle to Africa, are the main sources on Lake that Nell has used in his own writing. Essentially, in his querying of my work, he is maintaining that these two works are both reliable and authoritative. There's a wide range of issues, apart from John G. Lake, and research done on this topic, about which Nell and I disagree. These are the some of which will be taken up in passing as specifics are discussed. In essence, our worldviews are too different to be reconciled. I believe that faith healing is simply a complicated technique to stimulate the placebo effect. That is what they do in Redeemed Christian Church of God today. That is what they call faith healing today. They try to stimulate a placebo. Let me see. They try to stimulate a placebo effect. This is the place I'm trying to darken. To stimulate a placebo effect. That is what they are doing. Anybody that is teaching healing and that said that he has techniques on how you can achieve healing, on how healing can be done, is actually using techniques that are known over the years, that are known. that are not actually from God. Because when it comes to miracles from God, nobody has any techniques. No set of techniques can be used to learn it, to copy it, or to reproduce it in any way. In a religious context. And I've written in detail explaining this viewpoint. Nell, on the other hand, believes that faith healing is evidence of God's direct response to human prayer. Well, give or take, maybe. I argue that the Pentecostal movement was created and perpetrated by individuals. That is the basic thing that we say. Whereas they believe that the Pentecost was divinely inspired, that numerous miracles and so on accompanying its growth. You heard that from the mouth of Mr. 𝐂𝐚𝐤𝐞 too. So many miracles. So many miracles. But not a single one of those so many miracles can stand medical scrutiny. You don't see somebody without an arm having an arm grown. Somebody who never walked, walking. Somebody who does not have eyes, seeing. As you have in the Bible. These are people who are supposedly following the footsteps of Christ and putting themselves in position to replicate what he did, but denying essentially the fact that what they are doing is not what Christ did. I maintain that every miracle claimed by 𝐵𝐨𝐽 is bogus. At least you can see it. Every miracle claimed by 𝐵𝐨𝐽 is bogus. While I maintain that the list of miracles that occur under his ministry are too numerous to record. That is what they tell you in Pentecostal circle. They tell you of 100,000s of healings of 𝐵𝐨𝐽 in his healing rooms. In America, he actually, when he got back to America around 1913, he established what he called healing rooms in the American West, in Oregon in particular. And they started claiming that in a particular year or so, in the city of Spokane, Lake actually hit 100,000 people in a year. You should ask yourself how many people were actually living in Spokane at that time. And if you read the Pentecostal records, fantastic claims. The claims are not true. I want to tell anybody who has waited to this time that God has not recruited anybody to lie on his behalf. Not in fact, in particular, fraudulent people. Overall, our approach Lake and Southern African Pentecostalism through a materialist perspective. Look at the man. When you see this, you might think that the man is somebody who does not have faith. No, he wants to see evidence. One uses the theology of the fraudulent mission as an analytical tool. If this difference in outlook are so basic, one may ask, what is the point? Why responding to Nell at all? That is actually the same thing with me. If our outlook in life with what Mr. 𝐂𝐚𝐤𝐞 believes, what 𝐵𝐨𝐽 taught, if they are so different, why even talking about them? We talk about them because the Lord Jesus Christ, the Bible, commands us to check what everybody teaches, particularly when it comes to God. That is why I do not waste my time talking about the teaching of any imam, about the teaching of any guru. No, it's of no use to me. But if you say that you are representing the Lord Jesus Christ, then I have the Bible. This book is in my hand. To the glory of God, I can read it in Yoruba. I can even read it in English. And I know what God wants me to know. So let me let me go forward. These are the things you can. I'm showing them. I'm being a little slow so that you can get the primary sources that we are relying on. Yes, okay, this is what number 4. Number 7, you see John Alexander Dowie and the invention of modern faith movement. What you call the faith movement today, the teachings of people mimicking this, knowing that, and so on. Well, they were actually invented. They were invented around 1890. Yeah, around 1882. Yeah, you can see it around 1882 to 1889 in America. What you have? What is his name? Kenneth Hagin. What Kenneth Hagin popularized? Kenneth Hagin or Roberts? What's his name again? What they popularized? This was their inventor. It was John Alexander Dowie. Development of Southern African Christianity. Because this is related with Southern African Christianity, I hope that God will use it someday to wake up somebody in Southern Africa, as to the reason why they have an aberrant Christianity. I believe it is important for reader to see my viewpoint through a lens that is not distorted by myopic summarizations. As someone who has been a published historian for 2 decades, I instinctively seek out sources. This was Mr. Barry Morton talking about himself. He seeks out sources. Look at what we have here, please. The bulk of this paper from here. The bulk of this paper is based on primary sources that show them to be utter fictions. That is it. The bulk of what we are having in this place, they are primary sources that show them to be utter fictions. About 5 years ago, I began to investigate Lake as I was looking for a topic that connected the states of Indiana, where Lake's mission party was based and where I reside, and Africa. After being drawn to the Lake story, I began to investigate local source material. I started off reading sources such as Reid and Lindsay, as well as Lake's own writings. You can go down to number 9. All of which Neb believes are authoritative, but found quickly that the information they contain was unreliable. Lake, I found, was rarely at the places where he claimed to be at. Please get this one very clearly. Generally speaking, when you are reading the primary sources about the history of John G. Lake, you discover that he was never at the places where he claimed to have been. In the course of this paper, reading of this paper, you discover that John G. Lake claimed to have gone to seminary in the village of his wife around 1898 or so. He claimed to have been a seminary student in the village of his wife. It is when you check the records that you discover that there was never a seminary at all in that place. No seminary was ever in the place. Much of his established autobiography was contradicted by material I was examining. What I came to realize was that Lake was consciously fabricating a whole backstory about his life and experiences. You can see it. He began doing this on arrival in South Africa, and continued to do so afterwards. After Lake's death in 1935, Reid and Lindsay, both members of his entourage, continued to perpetuate his legend while engaging in their own faith-healing campaigns. They also invented stories about him. I did not set out to find this, but now see no reason to view John G. Lake and his successors as anything other than congenital and extravagant liars. A quote purported. Now listen to this quote. This is this is an example of the praise singing about John G. Lake. Please look at this particular part. A quote purportedly made by Cecil John Rhodes. Cecil John Rhodes was the Englishman that colonized I think the country was called was it Northern Rhodesia? The country that you now call Zimbabwe. The white man from England that colonized the place was Cecil John Rhodes. That was his name. That was why the country was called Rhodesia until Zimbabwe got independence around 35 or 40 years ago. Now listen supposedly to what Cecil John Rhodes said about the magnificent evangelist John G. Lake. A quote popularly made by Cecil John Rhodes about Lake serves as an example as to why I realized Lake was a charlatan. An example that illustrates Ned's blind spots. Cecil John Rhodes supposedly said his message has swept Africa. That is John G. Lake's message. His message has swept Africa. He has done more towards South Africa's future peace than any man. Rhodes supposedly said that. And if you follow the superscript number 11, if you go down, you see where you get it. Leadon, the name Leadon should be familiar to most people who are in Pentecostalism. That's the man that wrote God's Generals, so-called God's Generals. These are not Christians. Leadon was never a Christian. I think it's Richard Leadon or something like that. Okay, you can see what Leadon wrote. John G. Lake, his life, his sermons, his boldness of faith. Minneapolis. It was published by Kenneth Copeland's publication in 1994. So, in superscript number 11 that I was quoting before, you see it in page 236 of Leadon's book on John G. Lake, his sermons, his life, his sermons, his boldness of faith. Now, I've read for you what Cecil John Rhodes, what Mr. Rhodes supposedly said about John G. Lake. His message has swept Africa. He has done more towards South Africa's future peace. He has done more towards South Africa's future peace than any man. You know the problem? The problem is what you have in red here. Cecil Rhodes died in 1902. 6 years before Lake ever set foot in Africa. The man who gave this superlative certificate on the ministry of John G. Lake was dead 6 years before Mr. Lake ever set foot in Africa. Lake exposed in the American press. I start my response to Ned's article by referring to court cases. Now we are in the court. Court cases and exposes of Lake's activities following his return to America in 1913. Lake was conclusively shown to have been involved in impersonating other individuals. Did you get that? On the first occasion, he was arrested and convicted for impersonating a police officer. You can follow the superscript 13 and see where that is. The newspaper that you have that particular report. The second instance involved a newspaper exposing Lake for having dressed up as an Arab faith healer. The man that you heard, his name being praised, his writings being praised by Mr. William Kumuyi, was actually arrested for dressing as an Arab faith healer. After advertising his service as Abdul Ben Shinanda, that was the name he called himself, he sought out customers seeking a faith cure Mr. Lake's faith cure, they were for payment. They were for pay. They were for hire. When the newspaper exposed the scam, Lake was publicly humiliated. Superscript number 14. We can check, for the sake of people who do not know some of these things. We can just go and check the superscript number 14, and you see Spoken Daily Chronicle. Superscript number 13, you can see the Reverend Mr. Lake arrested, Oregonian, 25 August 1921. Number 14, Spoken Daily Chronicle, 21 and 25 November 1933. This was when Mr. Lake was arrested for calling himself Abdul Shinanda, or whatever he decided to call himself, for calling himself a Mohammedan, an Arab faith healer, in order to attract customer, paying customer. Let's go forward, please, because there's really a little more here. He sought out customers seeking a faith cure. When a newspaper exposed the scam, Lake was publicly humiliated. Another arrest that Lake faced was for fraud. In 1921, he was arrested for selling his church members worthless securities. Securities are shares. That is what those things that are called securities. He was arrested for selling his church members shares in fictitious companies that didn't actually exist. As one of these members of his congregation said, Lake used his church work to promote his various mining schemes with the idea of first gaining the confidence of people through the common ground of religion, and then selling to the congregation stock in which he was interested. We can check. This is superscript number 15. We can check it, and you see, healers accused of blue sky fraud. Oregonian, 24 July 1921. If you are interested, you can simply go to newspapers, historical newspapers of history, and you open Oregonian 24 July 1921. You are going to see the story of healers accused of blue sky fraud. That was the name it was called in those days in America. People who were selling fictitious shares in fictitious companies that actually didn't exist. Mr. Lake was arrested for one of such. In which he was interested. During these same years, Lake claimed to have effected over, you see what I was saying. Lake claimed to have effected over 100,000 faith healings in the American Northwest. The career, how do I call it? The glory of Lake among the deceived Pentecostal people is based on what you have on your screen. That Lake effected over 100,000 faith healings in America. They were fake. They never happened. On the basis of this, you might even think that Lake was actually greater than the Lord Jesus Christ. He was, but only for fraud, because those healings actually never took place. Yet, a number of these healings were proved to have never occurred. In 1921, Lake repeatedly prayed and laid hands on a girl with a broken leg and maintained she had been healed. He maintained that she had been healed. However, X-rays of the girl showed that her leg was still fractured. Had she not received standard medical treatment, she would have been crippled for life. The story of this, you can follow this superscript number 16, and you see it there. You see the source of the story. X-ray belies healing, Oregonian, 27 November 1921. Later on, in 1924, a girl who testified to having had her hearing restored by Lake was shown not to have been deaf. in the first place. You follow it. These failing reports paint a troubling picture about John G. Lake, to say the least. He was willing to defraud his own congregants for money by selling them worthless stocks and bonds. He was willing to say that he had cured severely injured children, even though he had not. Additionally, he was willing to use children to testify to cures that had never occurred. Lake was also willing to dress up as a Mohammedan in order to effect faith cures for paying customers, even though he was supposedly a Christian. Starting in the 1890s, continuing through his 1908 to 1913 South African sojourn, and for the rest of his life, this same pattern of fraud, deceit, and callousness continued. So it wasn't a one-off thing. The man that wrote so many books on which William Kumuyi based his faith on, and on which he founded a so-called Christian ministry, we are making verifiable assertion that between 1890s to 1913 and for the rest of his life, a hard pattern of fraud, deceit, and callousness. A wide array of primary sources demonstrate this. Early adulthood of Mr. Lake, starting from his arrival in Indianapolis, Chicago, in late 1907, through his time in South Africa, and later on, Lake created a whole new autobiography for himself that bore minimal relation to his actual activities. He did this for several reasons. One was to augment his mystique as a man of God and a faith healer. Additionally, he did it to hide unsavory details about his past. Lake claimed that as a young man, he attended a Methodist seminary in his wife's hometown of Newbury. You know, I mentioned that, Michigan. You can follow this. You can follow the superscript number 18 and you see. Before leaving for Chicago, that he attended a seminary in Newbury. He said that after his ordination, he was offered a pastorship at Peshtigo, Wisconsin, but turned it down to move to the new industrial suburb of Harvey, south of Chicago, where he founded the Harvey Citizen newspaper. He said he was the one that founded the Harvey Citizen newspaper and was his editor. You see the superscript number 19. You can follow it. All these superscripts, you had them at the foot of these pages. Superscript number 19, you see Lindsay and Reddit, they were quoting what they had about John G. Lake, their God, that he actually was the founder. He was the founder of the Harvey newspaper. He was the founder of the Harvey Citizen newspaper in Chicago, and he was actually his editor. The evidence that he lied about all these effects is overwhelming. Please get that. Most importantly, there is no record of any seminary in Newbury, Michigan, and nor was John G. Lake in Newbury at any time between 1888 and 1891. He was never there. His absence in the local newspaper is very telling, since the Methodist Church's activities were reported on almost every week. Additionally, John G. Lake's name cannot be found listed as a minister in any of the Illinois Methodist conferences, nor for Methodist conferences in Wisconsin and northern Michigan. Anyone with a cursory knowledge of Methodist practices in this period will know that each Methodist conference or region published a full list of his ministers, including those transferring and prospective ministers on trial each year. Lake is never mentioned. Please look at what you have in this place. Lake is never mentioned in any of the Methodist materials of that period. In short, Lake never attended seminary, and he never had a position in the Methodist Church in the Wisconsin, Illinois, or Michigan area. What was John G. Lake doing instead? In 1888, a butcher named John Lake appears in the Chicago City Directory for the first time in 1888 and reappeared in 1889. Is this John G. Lake? Perhaps. Lake's father was a butcher, so it is conceivable he and his brother Fred, also listed in various city directories as a tailor, moved to Chicago together. The same John Lake butcher does not appear in the Chicago Directory in 1890, which was roughly when Lake moved to Harvey, Illinois. Lake definitely did live in Harvey, which can be verified from a newspaper notification in mid-1891. Let's go forward. That he was returning to northern Michigan for his summer vacation. He was not, however, working for the Harvey Citizen, the newspaper he claimed to have founded and edited. Having checked all extant copies, all the copies of the newspaper, I can assert that the newspaper makes no reference to Lake of any kind. He was clearly not the editor and is not listed on the newspaper masthead. Where you are having the names of the editors and the sub-editors, the important people in the newspaper of their day, the name of Mr. Lake never appeared in the Harvey Citizen newspaper. Nor was he a founding or early member of the local Methodist Church in 1891, when he was allegedly considering an offer to take a pastorship in Wisconsin. So what was Lake actually doing? In 1914, Lake made a reference to roofing and construction work he did while in Harvey. So this must have been how he was supporting himself. Lake did not stay long in this Chicago suburbs. Instead, he moved back to Chicago. And a John G. Lake occupation, carpenter, is listed in 1892 City Directory. It will reappear in 1893 and 1894 edition as well. This is definitely the one and only John G. Lake, with no other Chicagoans of his era sharing his name. Moreover, in 1900 census, the 1900 census lists his occupation as carpenter. When I say the people who come to proclaim people in Nigeria, I generally pity them. I pity people like 𝐷𝐸𝐿𝐿 Kumuyi and people like 𝐂𝐚𝐤𝐿 with their education. If what the Bible says is actually true, if you are not born again, you really cannot describe God. You cannot see the kingdom of God. And when people are actually deceiving you, you do not know. That is why people like 𝐂𝐚𝐤𝐿 will say that his mentor was a man who barely passed school cert in America by the name of Kenneth Hagin. John G. Lake was actually a carpenter. His father was a butcher. His senior brother was a butcher too. So he was actually a carpenter. But the moment he came to Nigeria and he was, to Africa, to Southern Africa, and he was describing so many miracles that he had performed in the past and how miracles are done. And he's a white man, of course. During this early period in Chicago, Lake was dressing up as a minister. Please get that one very clearly. His photo, which can be seen in Kenneth Bupio's biography of Lake, Super 28, shows him dressed up as one with a Bible in hand. Why is he doing this? Why is Lake carrying a Bible with a collar around his neck? Since I have demonstrated that he was not, nor could have been a Methodist minister, then he obviously was impersonating one, as he later impersonated others. Mr. Lake was simply impersonating gospel ministers of the church. My view is that Lake was doing this for John Alexander Dowie. By the early 1890s, Lake was associated with Dowie. As he noted, it's being quoted here now. I knew him from the beginning. That's John Alexander Dowie saying that he knew John G. Lake from the beginning. During this exact period, John Alexander Dowie was using fake ministers in his faith healing services in Chicago. Dawie typically began his services by having people testify that he had healed them. On many occasions, he also then brought in ministers, doctors, or lawyers to verify the healing testimony that had been given. Of course, you know today, people who generally come out telling you that that when they went to Lokoja, they healed so many people. When they preach in Kano, they healed so many people. The same thing when they went to California, they healed so many people. They actually had a master. So I don't need to name names. All you need to do is just go and open your internet and start listening to Mr. Kumuyi, or start listening to 𝐷𝐵𝐸, and you know that what you are hearing about John G. Lake did not start today. We are reading things about 1890s, 1888, 1900, and so on and so forth. Dawie typically began his services by having people testify that he had healed them. On many occasions, he also then brought in ministers, doctors, or lawyers to testify, to verify the healing testimony that had been given. In Chicago, for instance, Dawie's publications showed that the Reverend Doug McCaig, the Reverend Lyman Palmer, and the Reverend George Welcome testified to healings at Dawie's services in the early 1890s. You can check it. You can check it from superscript number 30. And you see what our historian came to. These men are obvious fakes because they never existed. The man who founded Pentecostalism, John Alexander Dawie, made use of Reverend Doug McCaig, Reverend Lyman Palmer, Reverend George Welcome, among so many, according to him, to testify of the healings that he had done some 500 miles away, somewhere. It is only when you check the records, and generally speaking, this checking can be done today, because unlike other parts of the world, the history of people in America, you can go to history.com, ancestry.com, and the rest of it, and you actually locate who was this person. You only discover that there was never a Reverend George Welcome. There was never a Reverend Lyman Palmer. There was never a Reverend Dr. McCaig. They were fake people. So, John G. Lake, putting on collar about in the streets of Chicago in 1890s, a carpenter, for that matter, was simply and a follower of John Alexander Dawie, was simply impersonating ministers of the church. Modern databases such as ancestry.com, which make use of censuses and a wide range of other demographic data, show that all these so-called men of the cloth never lived in the United States, let alone in the Chicago area. Therefore, since Lake was not a minister, but was dressing up as one, he must have been impersonating one for Dawie. Particularly since he was a member of his church at the time, it was worth noting that Lake himself used impersonators to give healing testimonies at his own services throughout his career. The person, this John G. Lake, what you have there is basic. Lake himself used impersonators to give healing testimonies at his own services throughout his career. I will do this thing a little and then I'll close it. Because given the fact that the primary sources, we can check this is superscript number 31. Superscript number 31. For instance, in the church at Spokane, that is Spokane, Daily Chronicle, Daily Chronicle, Spokane Daily Chronicle, 29 June 1918, an article that read references as May 4 lists 267 individuals allegedly healed by lake. The vast majority of these individuals never existed. This was the daily newspaper of Spokane in northwest of the United States. The vast majority of the people who were listed in 1918 as having been healed by lake, they never existed. They were fake people. This was demonstrated by cross-referencing their names and addresses to city directories, censuses, and other demographic data. His family members are listed many times in Dowey's publication. That was John G. Lake's family from 1895 to 1902. In connection with various healings, his families were always having healings that they claim to have received from him and other Zionists. Almost all of these healings beggar belief and are highly implausible. Almost all of the healings, they are highly implausible. For example, Mrs. Lake claimed to have been healed from curvature of the spine, diphtheria, and consumption by Dowey in the mid-1890s, incurable heart trouble by her husband in 1898, and then from both erysipelas and rheumatism by Dowey in 1899 and 1900. Then in 1900, after having been shot in an accident in absentia prayers in Chicago led to the vanishing of the bullet that was lodged in her stomach. At other times, 2 of Lake's infant sons, along with 2 sisters and brother, were cured when Dowey, in absentia, made 5 tumors disappear from their bodies, or had made such maladies as hemorrhaging gums and hemophilia disappear. They were always having miracles. How likely are these accounts to be true? First of all, could a woman such as Jenny Lake, purportedly suffering from severe paralysis, rheumatism, curvature of the spine, tuberculosis, erysipelas, give birth to 6 children? Some of them during the same exact year that she claimed these miracles occur? Is it even statistically possible for a family such as the Lakes to suffer from so many life-threatening diseases in such a short period of time, let alone to be miraculously healed in every case? The most obvious explanation is that the Lakes were lying. Was John G. Lake at this time willing to lie about healings that never took place? Definitely. In 1899, Lake maintained that he was involved in the healings of 2 young boys in St. Mary, an orphan named George Amon and another youth named Claude Stevens. Once again, the problem with this alleged healing is that no individuals with this or similar name existed in St. Mary or anywhere else in northern Michigan at this time. In 1899, it was possible to get away with such fabrications. But with modern databases, such as Ancestry.com, we can see that these individuals were not counted in 1900 census. And nor did they leave a single trace of their existence anywhere for the rest of their lives. Lake's so-called business career, the major part of Lake's charismatic appeal is based on this so-called business career. A major part of Lake's charismatic appeal was his insistence that he had given up a lucrative career in business in 1907 to turn all my attention to bringing men to the feet of Jesus. Yet, despite Lake's claim to have built up major businesses in St. Mary and Chicago, contemporary records indicate he had a very, very modest career as a carpenter and salesman. According to Reddit, Lake first built up an extensive real estate business, so-called, with over $90,000 worth of property following his move back to St. Mary in 1896. These are fake. These are fake, and you can check by what follows. These claims cannot be verified, and border on the ridiculous, as contemporary reports demonstrate. In 1900 census, the 1900 census lists Lake as a carpenter, while some married newspapers in 1890 show that in the 1896 to 1898 period, he was buying single properties, investing money in them and reselling them. That he was a house flipper. The value of all these properties which he owned at the time was under $2,000. In comparison to other construction firms in the town, Lake ran a very small-scale one-man operation. He did not advertise his services in the newspaper, and nor did he bid on large public projects. In an extensive review of the local real estate scene in 1900, Lake is not even mentioned, although dozens of other contractors were. Nor was he a journalist at this time either, despite his claim of founding the Seoul Times newspaper. There are no extant copies of this short-lived newspaper available, but resources in St. Mary indicate that this newspaper was founded by one George Ferris, not Lake, with no mention whatsoever, where no mention whatsoever is made of Lake. Once again, the historical record showed that Lake was not doing what he claimed to be doing. A host of various sources from Illinois also demonstrate the falsity of Lake's claims to have been a wealthy businessman in Chicago. Lake claimed to have moved from St. Mary to Sound City in Illinois in 1901 to have become the leader of Darwin's real estate project. Yeah. Okay. Yes, okay, yeah. To have conducted business in lavishly furnished offices in downtown Chicago, he actually worked out of extremely modest office space in Waukegan. These are what you can verify about Mr. Lake. Now, there's this story about his participation in the 𝐷𝐴𝐻𝐼𝐸 killings. The 𝐷𝐴𝐻𝐼𝐸, they were formed from the group Charles Palm. Palm was the leader of the 𝐷𝐴𝐻𝐼𝐸 group that Lake was involved in Zion City around 1907. Charles Palm, the man that founded Pentecostalism, that his school was the first place where supposedly somebody started speaking in tongue, supposedly Chinese. The lady started writing Chinese, which of course you know was never Chinese. They were involved in killings around 1907 after the fall of John Alexander Dowie, when Dowie was expelled from his commune, the Zion City. And Palm coming in to lead a group that included Lake. They wanted to take over the commune, and they were teaching that you must not use any medicine. And quite a few killings actually happened during the time, to the extent that the population became angry against them. This is what you have. The reason I'm so sure of this is that it is historically well documented that during 1907, Lake's new Pentecostal community in Zion, called the 𝐷𝐴𝐻𝐼𝐸, imploded during this time. They imploded. The group imploded during that time, because they were involved in gruesome killings of people who actually came to them for healing. Yeah. So as I said earlier, this was basically the reason why Mr. Lake came to South Africa in 1908. The killings of 1907 was the reason why Mr. Lake came to South Africa, to start doing the same thing. Okay, as you can see, and so Lake and the 𝐷𝐴𝐻𝐼𝐸 fled. They fled within a month. The newspaper reported that you cannot find a 𝐷𝐴𝐻𝐼𝐸 in town anymore. Lake never discussed the 𝐷𝐴𝐻𝐼𝐸 killings thereafter. he never discussed them again. They came to Southern Africa, and they started their so-called Apostolic Faith Mission Church, and so on and so forth. Yeah. So what I've done is was John G. Lake a false prophet? This is the place where I'm going to stop. Major elements of Lake's preaching consisted of fabrications. As noted above, Lake's calling to Africa, which he claimed to have received in the summer of 1907, was surely an invention meant to obscure the Pyramid debacle. His so-called business career, also a major part of personal testimony when he arrived, was likewise nothing more than fantasy. The same could be said about the very first Pentecostal miracle in South Africa, to which Lake began testifying immediately upon arrival in the country. They were all fantasies. And yes, I actually highlighted personal testimony, that this is one of the baits that these people use in getting themselves into serious Christians. And I want to stop here by warning whoever comes by this material that if you go to any place and anybody is making his sermon on his personal testimony, and everything is based on the personal testimony, the word of God in the Bible, they are not enough. They are not enough for the person to teach about Christ. There's a danger. There's a danger where personal testimony, which you can generally not verify, where they displace the words of Christ that you have in the Bible. I said I will be stopping here. If anybody who really wants to get the material, you can go for the material. There are far more details there than we can accommodate in a very small video. This video is made, as I said, so as to wake up particularly people in Southern Africa, people who are following Mr. Kumoyi, people who have been deceived that John G. Lake was a model man of God, so that they might check again. This is just about the man. Next time we are going to make video on John G. Lake, we will actually look at his teachings. The only thing I can say is that I can quote the Lord Jesus Christ. I think in the book of Matthew, chapter 7, I can quote Christ in that place where he said that a good tree does not yield a bad fruit. A bad fruit does not come from good tree. And a bad tree too does not yield good fruit. Thank you very much.